Hello and welcome to the first session in our first trimester of the Jewish Learning Center. To all of you, I would like to formally introduce myself again. I am Rabbi Ron House, and I will be journeying with you over the course of these next 10 weeks as we study together material of importance to us as a Jewish people and as a Jewish community. This lecture that I am recording today, it's being recorded on Monday, December the 7th, and it just so happens that this marks 30 days since the passing of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. It was on November 7th that, at the age of 72 years old, the great scholar and Rabbi Jonathan Sacks passed away from an illness that he had battled at various times throughout his life. Rabbi Sacks, in addition to being the chief rabbi of the British Empire from 1991 to 2013, was also a towering intellect. He wrote a number of books, 20 major publications. Indeed, one of the books that we are using in our course in Genesis is Rabbi Sacks's book. But in addition to being a great intellectual leader, Rabbi Sacks was a man who believed in the importance of Jewish education, especially what he called adult Jewish education. He believed that Jews never stop studying and learning, that it was a requirement of Jewish life that we continue to learn and deepen our appreciation and understanding of our tradition all the way throughout our lives. And therefore, it is my decision to dedicate not only these first sessions, but this entire first trimester of our program here in the Jewish Learning Center to Rabbi Sacks's memory. May what we do together in our tradition, may what we do together in continuing our studies add to the profound base that Rabbi Sacks laid for all of us. I would like to welcome you to this session of our Learning Center. The course is called Shabbat. I recognize that many of you who are tuning in probably have studied about the Shabbat before. Some of you may even have a great deal of background in Shabbat, not only theoretical background from study, but many of you have observed Shabbos, and many of the traditions that we discuss and much of the information that you read about will seem familiar to you. But I can guarantee you that however knowledgeable you are, however much background you possess, there will be loads of new materials that we will cover in our course this year, material that is new to you, material that adds to your understanding and appreciation of the profundity of the Sabbath day. Let me say just a word about how this course is organized. Each week, at the beginning of the week, I will upload a lecture presentation of about 20 to 30 minutes. And the presentation is designed to accompany the particular reading assignment of any given week. So, for example, you have been assigned to read chapter 1 of your book on Shabbat. The pages have been assigned to you and given to you. So the lecture presentation this morning will be designed to help you understand that material, to appreciate that material. It will help to amplify and clarify the material that we will discuss next week in our chat room. The real meat of this course, the real heart of this course, is not just the readings and not just the lecture presentations. The real heart of the course will take place in our chat rooms. Once each week, all of the members of our class will gather together and will participate in a Zoom chat. And I would like to inform those of you in the Shabbat class that our Zoom chat sessions will always occur on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, you will be given the information to join the chat room and participate in the discussion of that week's reading material and presentation. I cannot emphasize how important it is to make sure you read the material prior to coming to the chat room and have the opportunity of viewing the week's presentation, the lecture presentation, prior to coming to the discussion that we will have together. Now, you do not have to come to the chat room. The chat room is really designed to take the material that is contained in the book we are using, to contain the material that I will be sharing with you in this presentation, and to add to that and to make it more significant. But I think you will all profit from participating in the chat room, and I urge you all each week to set aside about an hour, that's all the chat room should be, to continuing the discussion that we will begin here today. Having said that, I would like to begin by talking about the Sabbath. And by the way, I will use the term Sabbath or the term Shabbat interchangeably. Shabbat is merely the Hebrew term for what we call in English the Sabbath. The Shabbat is very, very important in Jewish life. And I can't overemphasize its significance. You know, there are, according to Jewish tradition, 613 mitzvot, 613 commandments that are found in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses that form the first part of the Hebrew Bible. Ideally, we as Jews are supposed to observe as many of those commandments as possible. We can't observe them all today because many of them cannot be observed in the absence of the temple in Jerusalem. Some of the commandments cannot be fulfilled outside of the land of Israel. But as many as we can, a traditional Jew is supposed to try and follow as many mitzvot as he possibly can in his or her life. And yet, despite the fact that there are many, many mitzvot, when we want to indicate that a person is a traditional Jew, is an observant Jew, what do we say about him? How do we identify a Jew who is traditional? Usually there are 2 signs by which such a Jew is signified. One sign is that he keeps the Sabbath day, that he observes the Sabbath. And the other sign is that he observes the Jewish dietary laws, that he keeps what we would call a kosher home. Now, there are other mitzvot, and they are also important, but these 2 signs, a Jew who keeps kosher, who observes the laws of kashrut, and who keeps the Sabbath and the holidays, that has always been known as the sign by which to identify a traditional Jew. And by the way, when our enemies in different ages sought to destroy the Jewish people, among the observances that they attacked and tried to do away with, which were the basis of Jewish life, they always tried to get Jews to violate Shabbat and to violate the dietary laws. In the holiday of Hanukkah, which we will celebrate later this week, one of the first laws that the Greek Assyrians under Antiochus Epiphanes, one of the first laws they passed was they prohibited Jews from observing the Sabbath day, and they also required Jews to eat forbidden foods, forbidden meat, to get them to profane kashrut. So of all the commandments, if I tell you that Shabbat is one of the most important, I would not be telling you anything that was not true. As a matter of fact, one of the terms for a traditional or a religious Jew, we call such a Jew, we say he is Shomer Shabbat, which means he observes the Sabbath day. And by that we mean if he observes the Sabbath day, he is probably also observant of all of the other or many of the other commandments contained in the Torah. Our sages throughout the ages have told us that the Shabbat is equal in importance to keeping all of the other commandments of the Torah. As a matter of fact, it says just that in the Babylonian Talmud, that one who keeps the Sabbath as it is supposed to be kept is regarded as if he had fulfilled all of the commandments of the Torah. The Zohar, a major classical text in Jewish mysticism, states that all of the secrets and the principles of the Jewish faith can be discovered and revealed in the observances linked to the Shabbat. That's how important the Shabbat is. One of the great Jewish writers of the last century, a man by the name of Achad Ha'am, perhaps best expressed how important the Sabbath was to the Jewish people in keeping them alive through the centuries when he made the following observation: more than the Jewish people keeping the Shabbat. More than the Jewish people have kept the Shabbat has kept the Jewish people, which means that it has been Shabbat and the observance of the Sabbath which has been responsible, among several other factors, for the survival and the continued existence of our people. And finally, according to our sages, if all the Jewish people, all of Israel, were able to keep 2 complete Shabbases according to traditional law, that would bring in the time of the Messiah. I don't want to raise your hopes, that's a big order. But Shabbat was considered so important to the rabbis that if all of Israel, all the Jewish people, observed 2 Shabbats correctly and properly in the proper way, that would be one of the signs of the coming of the Messianic era. Now, today's discussion is called Biblical Sources for the Shabbat. And quite honestly, there are many biblical sources for the Shabbat. You can find references to the Shabbat throughout the Hebrew Bible. I'm only going to concentrate on 4 verses with you today. And in order for you to be able to see those verses, I have sent out 2 sheets, 2 reading sheets that accompany this presentation that contain 4 passages that describe the Sabbath. As we go through these sheets, as we go through this material, please look at the sheets and have them close to you, because it will help you to understand some of the central points that we will be discussing next week in our Wednesday chat room talk. The first sheet I direct your attention to begins with the words at the top of the page, remember the Shabbat day, remember the Sabbath day, and the middle of the page it says, observe the Sabbath day. Shabbat was considered such an important mitzvah that it was one of those 2 handfuls of commandments that was contained in the 10 Commandments. There are 613 commandments, but 10 of them made it into the 2 tablets that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. Contained in the 10 Commandments, the only ritual commandment among all the 10 Commandments is the commandment to observe and to remember the Sabbath day. I would like to read with you now on that first sheet, remember the Sabbath day and observe the Sabbath day, the passages from the Torah that speak of the Sabbath. I will ask questions about this in a little bit, so as you follow along, try and concentrate on what you are reading. The first passage comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verses 8 to 11. And by the way, I hope all of you know how to read biblical verses. The entire Bible, all of the books of the Bible, are divided up into chapters and verses. When a chapter and a verse is cited, just go to the book of the Bible that's being mentioned, look up the chapter, and read the appropriate verses within that chapter. That is how to properly read a biblical text. Our first biblical text comes from the book of Exodus, the second book in the Torah, and the verses read as follows, and I'm only going to do this in English. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is within your settlements. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and all that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it and made it holy. So that is the first version of the 10 Commandments. This is the 4th commandment, to remember the Sabbath day. We'll talk about what that means. What does it mean to remember the Sabbath day? And we are told that we are not to do any work on the Sabbath day, neither we, nor our household, nor our servants, nor even our animals. We are to observe it as a day of rest. And the reason given is because of God's creating the world. For in 6 days God created the heaven and the earth. The second passage, same page, in the middle of the page, is taken from the book of Deuteronomy, that is the fifth book of the Torah. It is taken from Moses' again description of the giving of the Ten Commandments. And you will note that while it is very, very similar in content, it does differ. And we're going to focus on that next week in our discussion group. Notice what it says. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 to 15. It reads as follows. Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slaves may rest as you do. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Now, those are the two accounts of Sabbath in two different versions of the Ten Commandments. One of the things that might surprise you is they are, despite the fact that they are very similar, they are not identical. For example, look at the very first word of the passage. Which word did God say? Did he say to remember the Sabbath day? Or did he say to observe or keep or safeguard the Sabbath day? These are two different Hebrew words. The word for remember, zachor, zachor et yom HaShabbat, remember, take note of the Sabbath day. The second word, shemor et yom HaShabbat, guard, keep, observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the difference between remembering the Sabbath and observing the Sabbath? Is there a distinction? Are they just two of the different words to say the same thing, or is the Torah trying to teach us something? What is the difference between remembering the Sabbath day and keeping or observing the Sabbath day? The next thing you will notice is the reason for keeping and observing and remembering the Sabbath is different in the two accounts. According to the first account from the book of Exodus, the Sabbath is supposed to serve as a reminder of the works of creation. It is supposed to remind us that God created the world in 6 days, and that on the seventh day he ceased from work and rested. Therefore, he designated the Sabbath day as to be a day in which we remember that God is the creator of his people Israel and of the world. But note, the second account in the book of Deuteronomy says that the reason we should keep the Sabbath day is not because God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. It is instead because God brought us out of the land of Egypt and freed us with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Why are two very different reasons given for the observance of the same day? Are they exclusive? Does one exclude the other? If they're both important, why weren't both mentioned in both passages? Why does one passage stress Sabbath as a sign of God, creator of the universe, and the other the sign of God who redeems and makes a covenant with the Jewish people? Two very different words. When you do the Lecha Dodi on Friday night, there's a passage that says in the Lecha Dodi, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. God says, remember and keep in one divine word. Meaning, which did God say? Did he say zachor, remember? Did he say shamor? According to the Lecha Dodi, God did something that's impossible for human beings. He said both of the words together. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. When God consecrated the Sabbath, he said at the same moment both shamor, observe, and zachor, remember. How can that be? Why are both emphasized? When we recite the Kiddush, all of you know that on Friday night we recite the words of the Kiddush on a glass of wine, on a cup of wine. And the tradition is that over the wine, we say the blessing for wine, and then we say the Kiddush. And as we're talking about Shabbat, we say, V'Shabbat kadsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereshit. And God's holy Sabbath he has given us in joy and in love as a reminder of the works of creation. And then the very next line it says, Kihu yom techila lemikra kodesh, it is the first, the major of the holy festivals, zecher litziat mitzrayim, a remembrance of the exodus from Egypt. So when we say the Kiddush, we emphasize both themes. The theme of Ma'aseh Bereshit, God who created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, and sanctified the seventh day by making it Shabbos, and God who took us out of Egypt and entered into a covenant with us, and for whom the Sabbath is a sign of that covenant of the exodus from Egypt. These verses set our discussion. I want to go over with you 2 more verses for you to look at. We will discuss those when we meet in the chat room. On the second page, it says, Shabbat, a remembrance of creation. Okay? The heaven and the earth were finished in all their array. On the seventh day, God finished the work he had been doing. He ceased on the seventh day from all the work which he had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from the work of creation that he had done. These are the verses from the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, that say that the Sabbath was meant to be a sign of God creating the world and ceasing creation on the 6th day and creating the 7th day. The next reading comes from the book of Exodus, 31:12 to 17, and it reads as follows. Again, I invite you to read this with me and go over it before next week's session. And the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelite people and say, Nevertheless, you must keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout the ages, that you may know that I, the Lord, have consecrated you. You shall keep the Sabbath, for it is holy for you. He who profanes it shall be put to death. Whosoever does work on it, that people shall be cut off from among his kin. 6 days may work be done, but on the 7th day shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death." And then the very famous last portion, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael, the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant for all time. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel, that in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he ceased from his work and was refreshed. These passages, while not the only passages that speak about Shabbat, are the crucial passages that we will study together in our first chat room discussion next week, so please go over them. Now, I'm going to suggest certain questions for you to consider. Every week at the end of my presentation, I will ask certain questions for you to focus your reading. The purpose of these questions is for you to be able to think about them as you're reading, so that you read the material looking for certain points. Now, you will probably have your own questions. When you go over the material in your text, when you go over these passages that I have assigned you, no doubt questions will arise. Please feel free to communicate any questions you may have to me. And you don't have to wait till the chat room. Anytime between now and next Wednesday evening, if there's an observation or question, feel free to write me, either at my email address or through our website, The Learning House, and communicate your questions to me. If you let me know what's bothering you or what you're interested in knowing, it will help me prepare for our chat room discussion. But I'm going to suggest to you now certain questions, and these questions will be forwarded to you after the presentation, to think about as you read and as you go over the verses we have just studied, and as you review this lesson. Question number 1. What is the difference between remembering the Sabbath day and observing or keeping or safeguarding, however you want to translate it, the Sabbath day? What's the difference between remembering Shabbos and keeping Shabbat? Okay. Is there a difference, and what is the difference? Question number 2. has to do with the verses we just read. How is the Sabbath connected with the works of creation? Why does keeping the Sabbath form such an important part of the Jewish people? Why is it so important in understanding God as creator of the universe to understand the Sabbath day? How does the Sabbath help us to understand the lesson of God as creator of the world? And finally, the third question, I'm only giving you 3 short questions to consider. What is the connection between the Sabbath day, the Shabbat, and the Exodus from Egypt? How does the Jews' freedom from Egypt in the time of Moses, how does that relate? And what connection is there between the Jews being freed from slavery in Egypt and their keeping the Sabbath day that God commands them? What is the relationship between the two? Now, you may have many other questions as well. Again, I encourage you to think about those questions and even to address those questions to me during the course of the week. As I conclude today, just one final point. We are about to enter the week of Hanukkah. Thursday of this week, we will light the first of the candles on our Chanukiah, on our Hanukkah menorah, and we will do what Jews have always attempted to do in the face of darkness. We will increase light. Hanukkah, which celebrates a dark period in Jewish history, 2,200 years ago, when one of the early enemies of the Jewish people attempted to destroy our way of life, and they persecuted us and forbade us from keeping the Sabbath and studying our Torah and keeping kashrut and training future leaders. One of the blessings that came about was that God miraculously was with our people. We defeated them. We drove them out of our land. And to celebrate our salvation and the preservation of Judaism, we kindled lights. This has been the Jewish response to darkness throughout our history. We Jews have known sad times. We have known challenging times. We have known horrible moments. But in the tradition of Judaism, in dark moments, we do not curse the darkness. Rather, we kindle a small light. We are going now in our own lives through a difficult period of time. This is the period of pandemic. These next 3 weeks, according to our government officials, we will be relatively confined as we try and break the back of the spread of the COVID virus, and we try and protect our hospital emergency rooms. In this period of darkness, continue to create light. Light candles together with your friends, with your family. If you can't do it in person, do it by means of video, virtually. And let us respond as Jews have always responded to the darkness of the past by kindling new light. I wish you all a very happy Hanukkah. I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Thank you for beginning this journey of education with me.